Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Media Magpie podcast. Now, this is a topic that I've really wanted to talk about on this podcast. This is one of the ones that I actually didn't really think I would talk about. I don't know when I would, but I knew that I wanted to. It was definitely one that I've, definitely wanted to mention and talk about. And I mean, it was kind of fitting because the previous episode I talked about Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, which is a movie from Marvel, which is kind of connected to this movie in a way because the villain in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania is also the villain in this series, Loki Season 1 and Loki Season 2. But we're not talking about Loki Season 2, we're talking about Loki Season 1. That's another episode. I want to make 2 episodes for both seasons. So I'm going to talk about Loki Season 2, all things Loki Season 2, but I want to mainly primary focus on Season 1 for this episode. Don't worry, a Loki Season 2 episode will come out eventually. Don't know when, but it will. Because I just want to state, just from the get-go, that this is, if not, in my opinion, the best Marvel TV show of all time. Because when Marvel were doing the TV shows, I watched WandaVision, I've watched Captain America, Falcon and Winter Soldier. I've watched all the shows that they've done, and out of all of them that I've watched, this one, Loki, both 1 and 2, both season 1 and 2, I thought it wouldn't be able to top in season 1, but it did. It made it, I feel like season 2 is kind of, in a way, almost even better than season 1. Season 2 is like, oh my god. But this show came out in 2021, early days of when they were doing the shows. It was I can't remember on the timeline where it came out, but basically, I know where it came out on the timeline, in the actual MCU timeline, but I'm saying the timeline of when in the shows. But it was one of the first ones, if I remember correctly, and my god, again, before even recording this episode, I watched episode 1 like yesterday as the day of recording this, and then I watched episode 2 just before I started recording this. So just to get in the feel of this show again, even though I have seen probably Loki Season 1 and Loki Season 2 at least, both times, like at least I've watched the full series like over 3 or 4 times. I love it. It's such a great show. Anyway, I can get into how much I can keep saying I love it. Now let's get into talking about the episode, because as much as I love it, the whole reason that I'm here is to talk about it. So Loki Season 1 premiered on Disney Plus as a part of the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Phase 4. So again, yeah, it was part of the same phase as, I believe, yes, it was part of the same, well, I can't remember, I don't think it was part of the same phase as Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. I'm just trying to remember. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania might have been a different phase. If people remember when I was talking about it, no. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania was the first movie of Phase 5. So this was before Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. So as part of Phase 4, Ant-Man and the Wasp was the start of the new phase. But it incorporated some same things. It teased for Season 2, which was in Phase 5. Anyway, so this was in Phase 4. But getting back onto the topic of Loki, not Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, because we don't want to talk about that show. The show follows Loki, the God of Mischief, of course, which is played by the amazing actor of Tom Hiddleston. Again, I have a list of actors that I'd probably say are amazing, and he is up there. He is on that list of actors that are top-notch. So it follows him, the God of Mischief, after he escapes with the Tesseract during the events of Avengers Endgame. So again, I should say this in more episodes, and you should probably know it anyway. Major spoilers for the thing I'm talking about, I will say. But if you didn't watch, and major spoilers for everything that's connected to it. That's what I'll say. So spoilers for Endgame, I'll just say. Because if you didn't watch Endgame, this show links directly to Endgame. And the reason why this show exists is because the Avengers went on that time heist to stop Thanos. Well, not stop Thanos, but bring everyone back. Get the stones and bring everyone back. And because of that, they affected one of the timelines. They let a Loki variant become free. And in that Loki escaped with the Tesseract. And that's where it kicks off. That's where Loki Season 1 kicks off. Right when he leaves with the Tesseract. Because in the movie, we see Loki get the Tesseract, he disappears, never see him again, we don't know where he is. Thor's saying, Loki, Loki, where are you? We don't know where he is. And then the movie goes on, they get the time stones, they bring everyone back, and, shit happens and all that stuff. Anyway. But we never see what happens to Loki after that. And this show explores what happens while the Avengers are doing their thing. And again, the thing is, as much as it explores what happens and where he goes, time works different than the TVA. So it probably doesn't happen, it's a bit interesting the way that time works. That's one big thing you learn about this show is that, time works differently than the TVA. And there's theories, and they haven't really confirmed it, but I believe, and I think it's true, the Time Variance Authority, the TVA, which I'll get to in a minute what they are, I believe it's actually where it's located is in the quantum realm, which makes sense because that's how they time traveled, right? That's how the Avengers time traveled. That's how time works differently in the quantum realm. Time works differently in the TVA. It just makes a lot of sense, and it's all linked to that. And I don't think they've confirmed that, but I don't think they need to. I think people are pretty smart to know the Time Variance Authority is in the quantum realm, so it links to the quantum realm as well. So it's actually, and again, as I said, this is so much better than Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. It was before it as well, and then they just butchered the movie. Anyway, we're not talking about Ant-Man. We're not talking about the movie. I gotta stop bringing it up, but that was the past episode, so you can see why I can relate. Anyway, let's talk about something good. But basically, so this, follows the events after Endgame with Loki escaping, and then he ends up being in a desert where he is captured by the Time Variance Authority, as I already mentioned, the TVA, which is an organization that maintains the sacred timeline. So something that the Phase 4 introduced when it sort of came to be was that there was going to be this whole thing of time travel, multiversal theory, and all this stuff. And Loki really put the pin in that and really explored that. Because this show really explores, as I said, time travel, multiverse theory, but it also explores free will versus destiny and how, because the TVA control is protecting the sacred timeline, what they call the sacred timeline, and maintaining it, the way they do it right is they're pruning when someone steers off the path of the sacred timeline, as they introduced with this funny video of this of Miss Minutes, which is voiced by Tara Strong. And if you don't know who that is, she's done a lot of she's been in Teen Titans, she's done a lot of animated stuff. Anyway, getting sidetracked. But basically, the reason why the TVA protects the sacred timeline, or what they call the sacred timeline, is because if variants variate off the sacred timeline, they create branches. And then if branches get created, one thing happens to another, it all branches away, millions of branches happen, which then will cause a multiversal war. And because of that, they don't want that to happen. So what they do is prune what they call when a variant varies off and goes off into and doesn't follow the path that the timekeepers in the show. There's timekeepers, they're the ones controlling the TVA. What they call a nexus event. And that's when, again, as I said, a variant goes off and does his own thing that he's not supposed to. So then the TVA steps in, prunes that timeline, and basically puts the variant on trial to do whatever. They ever prune that variant, whatever. So with that, because Loki wasn't really supposed to get the Tesseract and escape, he was actually supposed to be imprisoned in Asgard. He was supposed to die at the hands of Thanos in Endgame, or in Infinity War, because we saw that from the first movie. It wasn't supposed to happen. So that's where the TVA comes into play. But again, it's interesting because, again, as I said, it explores the essence of free will, like free will versus destiny. Like, are we supposed, like, the show says that because they're protecting the sacred timeline, technically the free will that someone has to do something and veer off, if the timekeepers deem it not on the right track, then again it's off. So the timekeepers are controlling what everyone does, keeping in track what everyone does. So in that sense, no one really has free will. It's sort of just destiny, and that's sort of just what people have to do, and that's just their path. They're set to be who they are. And it's very interesting how the show goes with that. But then and then Loki tries to challenge and explore that and go, well, hang on. If that's the case, if we're the protectors now, because the TVA grabs him, but then Mobius. So I'll get into the casting. Before we get more into it, I get into the characters and casting. I'm getting excited. As you can see, I'm getting excited. I love this show. I'm getting ahead of myself. So the characters and casting. Tom Hiddleston plays as Loki, of course. The God of Mischief. He reprises a role for the MCU. And I was so happy that this show does exist, because again, it just gave Loki the light to... we just got to see Loki in a different light, and also just got to see more of Loki. He was an unexplored character. We only really saw him as a villain. And in this show, and particularly in season 2, he starts to sort of redeem himself. Without spoiling anything, he redeems himself in my eyes, and he learns a lot from the TVA and his friends, and he just learns a lot. And then and I won't spoil again, there's this character, Sophia Diamaro. She plays a character. I'll get to her in a minute, because I'm sort of want to talk about that sort of in the show, you sort of a surprise of who she is. I won't get to her in a minute. I'll get back to that. But then Owen Wilson, which, oh my God, Owen Wilson's in this, the guy who voices Lightning McQueen in Cars is in this show. And Owen Wilson, another pretty good actor, I will say. He plays Mobius is it Mobius M. Mobius? Really? I don't know if that's actually his name. Maybe I've written that wrong. But Mobius. I don't know if he has actually a last name. Anyway, he plays Mobius, which is the TVA agent who befriends Loki. And sort of at the start, when Loki is on his trial, sort of goes, hang on. Let's not prune him. He was going to get sentenced to prune. But Mobius goes, we're tracking down another Loki. We sort of need an expert. I'm going to take him on and use him. And sort of maybe befriend him a bit, and sort of he sort of wants to use him as a professional, and then they sort of end up, I will say, being friends and having a good time. Anyway. And then Dugan Marbuf Raw, I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong, plays Judge Ravonna Renslayer, which is the higher ranking TVA official. And she's the one that starts the trial and is in the trial of Loki, and she's probably the only one that's actually seen... You sort of know she's the only one that's actually met the Timekeepers. And she knows that, she knows these secrets about the TVA, the law. And we'll explore a little bit about that because Loki, once he finds out that there's these Timekeepers, he wants to overthrow the TVA and control it. And yeah, he wants to have a meeting with these Timekeepers and learn all about them and see what makes them tick, right? And Judge Renslayer is the one that he could probably get that from. But, she's not going to give him the light of day. So he uses Mobius to hopefully eventually... Mobius will give his... because Mobius... Renslayer trusts Mobius. So Loki's going to do his stuff to hope for, at the end of the day, maybe get a meeting with them. Anyway, that's sort of his, his whole plot, and, stuff happens. And yeah, yada, yada, yada. Anyway. And then, as I said, Tara Strong plays Miss Minutes, which is the TVA mascot, which is a voice role. She's kind of like a little clock, an animated clock. So Tara Strong she's not actually there, it's just a voice role, and which is really cool, and we'll explore more into that, how that character comes about. And then there's also a lot of other actors. There's Richard E. Grant, who plays classic Loki, Jack Veal, who plays Kid Loki, and Debo Opria, I think that's how you pronounce it, who plays boastful Loki. Because then, when Loki does get pruned, spoilers, in the show, there's a bunch of other Lokis that are in the Void, which is where all the pruned things get chucked in the Void. So he meets all those other Lokis. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. That's later on in the season. But no, so now let's talk about sort of the post-production visual effects of the show. So basically, the film location, it was shot primarily in Atlanta, Georgia, with additional scenes in London. Now, the production started at around February 2020, but unfortunately was, because of COVID, again, It was 2020. It was paused. The production was paused during the COVID-19 before it resumed back in September 2022 and wrapped up in December 2020. Which again, they gave them up time. They released it around 2021. I can't remember roughly. I think it was mid 2021. And yeah, so it would have come out sooner, but got delayed due to an unfortunate pandemic. That's right. Now the visual effects are really there's heavy visual effects in this, especially with the TVA environments, the time portals, and someone that I'm going to talk about later, Eliath. But basically, yeah, because the time portals, how they work is they're basically these window, these sort of orange, not really orange, not see-through windows that just sort of pop up. So they're not real. They're special effects, and again, probably with the staffs that they have where they can prune people, there would be effects too on that, and the people getting disintegrated. So there's a lot of CGI in this, and it looks really good. It actually looks really good. They had the money for it, and they have the money for it. It's Disney, so they put the money into it, and you can see it is really good. So it just looks amazing, and I love it. And in regards to editing and post-production, the series was edited to maintain a cinematic feel, and it had, the normal type of stuff with seamless transitions, timelines, and it showed the multiversal locations. It's sort of when they travel to a new place, it showed the name, and it had a little thing moving fastly and showing the time frame of when they're there, which was either 1905 or 79 AD, whatever. And it let us know that that's where they were. They were traveling the multiverse and, exploring all these different times. And then in regards to music, which does, I feel really, honestly, sometimes music really plays a crucial part in the show, and a show wouldn't be as good as it is without music. But again, everything plays a part, but music is something that I really resonate with shows or anything, movies, shows, anything, games, everything. I resonate with music, and this show had an amazing music soundtrack, all of it, which was composed by Natalie Holt. And the soundtrack in this show kind of features a blend of orchestral and electrical elements, and it works so well in the show. And it sets up that, and then just you sort of get this chills where there's moments where it just sets it up, stuff happens. I sort of can't explain it. I can hear it, and there's just, I don't know, there's no way to explain it, but it just, in my opinion, just works so well to set up what is happening when you're looking at it. And you sort of just, even when the quiet moments or the busy moments, it just works so well. And it's so great. So you sort of just, I feel like the only way to understand how well it is you have to watch the show and just hear it and see it for yourself. So if you haven't already watched or seen it, again, what are you doing listening to me talk about it? As much as I love you being here and me talking about it, thank you for tuning into the podcast, but I'd rather you go watch it, see it first, then come back, because I'm talking all about it and spoiling it for you. I don't want to do that. I'd rather you see it first, come back, and then sort of get the insight and all the exploration about this show and my feelings about it. So go, if you haven't seen it and you're here, what are you doing? I'm just saying, go off, watch it. What are you doing? You're missing out. You're missing out. Now let's get into a sort of breakdown of the episodes of Loki Season 1. So in the first episode, as I said, Loki's arrested from the TVA and learns about the sacred timeline. He learns about that, he's a variant. He technically doesn't live on the sacred timeline. He's not who he is. He's not the true Loki. There's all these variants, and he's one of them. And he learns that, free will is just not a thing. They have a set path. He has a set path. He's supposed to die by the hands of Thanos. He's supposed to accidentally kill his mother by sending the Dark Elves off, and it shocks him because he doesn't know that life. And then he sees it via a recording on a projector, and it freaks him the fuck out. And he goes in tears, man. He does. And we've seen all this, but for him, it's just new. And it's crazy. So Loki sort of just sees his future, and sees the death, and it just shakes him. He sees the death at the hands of Thanos and shakes him. So, and I think that sets him up, and it makes him realize as well that nothing that he does matters, but also like all the stuff that they've shown him, and that, and as well he runs into Casey, who was earlier on, is another TVA worker, and he finds this drawer of Infinity Stones, and there's a bunch of them, and Casey says, yeah, some of the guys use it as paperweights, and that clicks with him, saying that, hang on, there's no, and his magic is disabled there, he can't use his magic, so yeah, he's kind of stuck there, and he sort of just has to trick his way and manipulate his way to get out. And then he realizes, hang on, I think I need to this is a powerful thing that I could run. I'm going to try and overthrow it, which is sort of his kind of main goal. It kind of changes later on, but that was his starting main goal. Happens. So that's sort of the first episode, what happens. And, there's sort of, and then at the end of the first episode, Mobius says, well, the reason why I've kept you alive and made it so that you don't get pruned is because we're trying to hunt a dangerous variant. And that dangerous variant is a variant of you. And that's where the episode ends. So that's episode 1. Now in episode 2, it's sort of, they investigate the variant. So they sort of, figure it out. They go to the spot where the variant is and find out that the variant's not there. But also, we do see a scene earlier on where the variant kidnaps one of the TVA agents. And that sort of happens. And then we still have no clue, and even the TVA have no clue who this variant is, what type of Loki variant this variant is. But at the end of episode 2, we find that out. And that's what I'll talk about. So they sort of do that. And then they, Mobius, it was a bust of a mission. So then Mobius says, they sort of, they go to the mission, stuff's up. And then Mobius said, all right, you know what? Renslayer's not happy with me. This is the last attempt I'm going to give you. So he sets Loki to work and makes him look at paperwork and go for the notes and go for all the stuff that they've done. And something that Loki finds out is while he's looking for the massive amount of Kate's files and notes, is that the timelines, because as I mentioned before, when an event that's not supposed to happen, when someone does something that's not supposed to happen, the timeline branches. And then that cascades into other things that aren't supposed to happen because that person's done one thing. It's a ripple effect, right? You drop a pebble, it ripples, and it keeps going, and it ripples all over the water, right? So that's what the branching of the timeline is. There's a ripple effect. But something that Loki figures out is that when it comes down to apocalypses, when bad things are already going to happen and the world's already going to end, no matter what you do in that timeline or when you're in that time, when it's an apocalypse, even if you do something, there's still that it's still that determined set path where the world blows up. So as much as they figured out, as much as Loki might, and again in the episode, let some goats, they go to a time where there's a volcano erupting, he lets some goats free, he lets everyone know that that they're going to all die, and Mobius was like, the timeline's going to branch, it's not going to work. Mobius looks, no variant activity. So they found out that the variant was hiding out in apocalypses. So the variant was killing the Minutemen, the TVA agents, and hiding in apocalypses to hide his tracks. Or hide their tracks. So then they sort of got some evidence from the first episode that they got about with this gum that led to and then they looked at the case notes, which then led them to find out that the variant was in 2050 in an apocalypse at Roxxcart, which Roxxon is sort of a corporation which is mentioned a couple times in Marvel in the MCU, but this was an interesting one that they mentioned here, and it's very cool. So they track down the variant and then they find out that Loki finds out that the variant that is killing them, and that is the bad variant Loki, the superior one, which Mobius says to Loki, and so trying to piss him off and make him look for that Loki, that it's actually a female Loki, which we find out her name to be, well, she doesn't say in episode 2, but we find her name to be Sylvie. So it's not a male Loki at all, and I remember watching and I was shocked. I was not expecting it. I'm like, man, this is good. Holy shit. This just got interesting. And yeah, so that's sort of, and then episode 2 ends with the female Loki setting off a time bomb, creating all these branches in the timeline, and then escaping, and then Loki also escaping and running off to catch Sylvie. So then episode 3 follows Loki and Sylvie, and they escape at Lamentus 1, which is a doomed planet, and which is literally, obviously going to blow up, because that's how Sylvie's been escaping. She's been going to apocalypses. Now, basically, Loki wants to, again, his plan was he talked to Sylvie in the past episode, in episode 2, and now this is episode 3, and he said, why don't you want to take over the TVA? What's your problem? Like, we could do it together. If we work together, we can do this. Look, Sylvie doesn't want to work with him. Sylvie wants to destroy the TVA. We learn that the TVA actually took Sylvie's life. And I mean, because Sylvie did something that Sylvie wasn't supposed to, the TVA... Sylvie was a kid when this happened. Sylvie was a child. And Sylvie somehow escaped, lived, got out, and has had a set goal of destroying the TVA. Because it's taken her life away, and she has not had life because she wasn't supposed to do what she was supposed to do, and because of that, they were going to prune her. So she's had this, she's had this bad experience with the TVA, and she wants to overthrow them and just destroy them. And then, so they sort of bond over their past and sort of discuss the TVA stuff. And then, unfortunately, Sylvie's actually been traveling around is she has stolen one of the TVA's TemPads, which is how they travel on with their time windows. Now, unfortunately, when they're on Lamentus 1, Loki does break the TemPad, so they're stuck there. So they actually try, and in that episode, it's cinematic, it's epic, and they try to escape on a flight, and they try to get on, and they couldn't. They couldn't escape. So it sucks. So they couldn't escape. They were going to die. They were literally going to die on the planet. And a bit of an interesting moment happened where, Loki, then it sort of leads to this moment, sort of, they're hanging out together, they're, about to die, and then they have this intimate moment. Dude, Loki, if Sylvie is a variant version of Loki, and Loki's a variant version anyway, but he's Loki, falling in love with technically himself. Like, whoa. That's how self-centered he is. He's falling in love with himself, which they make a joke about, like, what the hell, bro? You've fallen in love with yourself. How self-centered can you be? But I love it, and I kind of loved it. And I wasn't expecting it. This show was there was so many punches they threw at us unexpectedly, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. So yeah, that's how they save him. And then basically, Sylvie's in the TVA. So then she runs about, and then Loki kind of runs about with her. They find the place where the Timekeepers are, and then something they realized, and another big puncher, is that these 3 alien Timekeepers, we sort of learn that there's these Timekeepers, these 3 Timekeepers that are who dictate the flow of time, and they're the rulers of the TVA. When they run into those Timekeepers, they're actually just robots. They're not real. Like, they get destroyed and they're just robot heads. They're not real. They're fake. So, yeah, they confront the Timekeepers, and then it's just revealed that they're fake. And then at the end of episode 4, so this is episode 4, at the end of episode 4, Loki gets pruned, Sylvie gets pruned, and they're sort of just, in the void, as I mentioned before. I'm in the void bit now. And that's where Loki does meet the other Loki variants, which I mentioned earlier in the casting. And so the show keeps going on, and you're just wondering, where the fuck does it... I was wondering, where the hell does it go from here? He's been pruned. Is it possible to get back out? And that's where the journey keeps going on. And this is where this show is just amazing. Like, I could talk on and on and on and on and on about this show, but it would be a long-ass episode. So I'm trying to get through these episodes very quickly, kind of giving them a quick rundown, as you can tell, but I could go full in depth if I wanted to. But I'm not, because then I'll be here for hours. So that ends with episode 4, Loki getting pruned. Now in episode 5, again, Loki encounters classic Loki, Kid Loki, boastful Loki, and alligator Loki. So there's an alligator Loki, which is interesting. So there's a lot of variant Lokis out there. And the Lokis, they've been, pruned, but they tend to survive because they're the smartest and most, let's just say they're very, they've got tricks up their sleeves, as Loki is the god of mischief. So basically, they're there, they realize that, there's nothing they can do. They just have to survive and stay there. And that's what the Lokis have done. They survived, stayed there. They got their base of operations. But then our Loki, the Loki that we're following in this show, decides that he wants to take on Alioth, which Alioth's basically the big bad monster that sort of basically removes all the things that have been pruned forever. They feed the beast. So there's a beast called Alioth that basically is this big, massive purple gas thing that just devours everything that's been pruned in the void. And then they're gone forever. But Loki decides that, hang on, you know what? I want to fight Alioth. Because if Alioth is here, Alioth's the guard, maybe Alioth will let me go through and maybe I'll find a way to whoever really, really is controlling the TVA. Because as I said in the previous episode, we found out that, the Timekeepers are fake. They're not actually controlling. They were just puppets. So Loki's still questioning and pondering who is actually really, and I mean really, controlling the TVA. And he has to figure that out. And then Sylvie's there as well, as I mentioned. He runs into Sylvie. She's there. And the other Lokis are like, well, we got a female Loki. That's cool. She's named Sylvie. And then, Mobius is there too because he wants to save. Because Mobius actually kind of likes Loki and actually becomes really connected with him and close with him. They sort of form a friendship. As much as Mobius sort of wants to use Loki, and at the start, he wanted to use Loki and just, get as much information as possible and sort of just, it was a mission. Loki for him was a means to an end, but he ends up really liking Loki and they sort of bond and become really good friends. And then that's more explored in season 2. They're like besties. And because, Loki kind of does tell Mobius that the TVA is fake and the Time Lords are, the Timekeepers are fake, Mobius doesn't know what to trust anymore. So he doesn't know if he wants to trust Renslayer. Renslayer's still, this doesn't change anything. We still got to do the TVA. He's questioning a lot of things. So he goes on the side of the variant, the Loki. And he's in the void with, her as well, but he still has his temp pad so he can get back. But then, so he goes back, he's fine. But then Loki goes off and battles Alioth. And they battle, and then Loki and Sylvie and all the other Lokis battle Alioth, and then they basically sort of enchant Alioth to calm Alioth down and basically open up this portal to Alioth, and they enchant Alioth, which then reveals a citadel. And this is where it gets really interesting at the end. And it reveals where the actual person who's running the TVA. So now the final episode, episode 6, it's titled For All Time, Always. And that's mentioned a lot on the show. It's mentioned even in episode 2. That's sort of like the motto for the Time Variance Authority. For all time, always. So that's where the title comes in, and that's what the last episode is. So then Loki and Sylvie walk up to this sort of fortress citadel thing where they sort of run into and hoping to figure out who the actual is running the TVA. And then Miss Minute's there to greet them and saying, "He who remains has been waiting for you." And they're like, "Who?" He's like, "He who remains. He's the one who's lasted the longest. He's the reason why the sacred timeline exists. And he is the one who remains." So basically, Loki and Sylvie meet He Who Remains, who is the curator of the TVA. And he explains to them why he controls the timeline to prevent a multiversal war. Because a variant version of him, the original one, whoever he was out there, found a way to travel the multiverse, to travel to different timelines. And because of that, other versions, again, of him knew how to do that. So he, made friends with other versions of himself, traded, gave stuff, they would trade stuff from their universe to other universes and sort of, become friends and everything. And he, learn a lot about not only his universes, because he was a scientist. Originally, the original He Who Remains was a scientist, the guy who originally figured out time travel. So he wanted to explore that and explore other timelines and everything. But that being said, there was other variants of He Who Remains who didn't want to be friends and sort of learn about the other timelines and other variants. He wanted to take over the other timelines and be the only variant and sort of take control and be the leader of all the timelines and overthrow them. Which one of the variants, which we do see, as I mentioned, we do see a version of He Who Remains, which is Kang the Conqueror. And that is a variant version of He Who Remains, Kang the Conqueror, one of the big bad ones. And he is one of the ones who wants to conquer and take over universes and has destroyed universes. We learned a lot about that in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania with Janet. She sort of sees in the mind by touching his ship when she's in the quantum realm and sees in the mind that this guy, Kang, he's destroyed worlds. It's not good. And she does, and then she realizes not to let him free and all that, blah, blah, which is in the movie, which I explained. But basically, yeah. He's saying that the reason why I've created this TVA is to make it sure that my variants don't exist and that nothing bad happens. Sylvie doesn't believe that. Sylvie's like, but I want everyone to be free to make their own choices. I want free will. And, I believe you're wrong. You are just you want power. You're just hungry for power and just want to control stuff. And then Loki goes, hang on. I think you're wrong, Sylvie. Don't you see what he's trying to do? He's just trying to make sure that nothing bad happens and that there's no more bad versions of him. Because as he said, the reason why he's doing this is so that, I might be a dickhead by controlling and making only one proper flow of time and pruning all these timelines. But if I don't do this, there are worse things to come, including a multiversal war. And that is the reason why he's done it, because he doesn't want a multiversal war to happen. Because it's happened in the past, and then that's why he's happened, so he didn't want it to happen again. Anyway, so then what Sylvie does is Sylvie kills him, which then unleashes chaos and then creates the multiverse. Which again, it's very confusing because I was like, hang on. I obviously knew they were going to create the multiverse. I knew this was going to happen, but they're like, Loki's a bit upset that this happened. I'm like, But it's like, yep, the whole reason. And then as Sylvie has killed He Who Remains, the variant version of Kang, he goes, I'll be seeing you soon. You'll see me. And we do. Obviously in Ant-Man and Wasp, which is a shit movie, but we see him. And then Loki sort of, realizes what Sylvie's done, freaking out, comes back to the TVA. And at the end of the episode, we see instead of where the Timekeepers were, there was like 3 statues in the TVA of the Timekeepers. There is a statue of He Who Remains. And Loki has returned to the TVA, but no one remembers him. Mobius doesn't know who he is. Now, I won't say why, but he comes to TVA and no one remembers who it was. Anyway, if you could figure it out, I'll just say he does end up in a TVA version that is not his TVA. That's why they don't know him. And, well, actually, it is his TVA, but it's set in the future. It's set not in the future, it's set in the past. And that's where season 2 gets confusing, and I don't need to talk about that because that's all season 2 stuff. But basically, it ends with Loki realizing there actually is a big bad out there, and Sylvie's just killed the one that was controlling all the big bad versions of himself, and now they're just set free. and it causes chaos, and that's where season 2 unfolds and all this stuff happens. And that's where Kang comes about, because the whole reason why Ant-Man and the Lost Quantumania happens with Kang is because of Sylvie killing He Who Remains and setting open to this multiversal stuff and all this crazy stuff. So it's amazing how and it's beautifully set up. Like, Loki really sets up the multiverse and all this stuff with like time travel and everything very well. Like, in my opinion, it doesn't get any better than the Loki show. I feel like it just sets it up. So that's sort of a rundown or a breakdown of the episodes. Now let's sort of get into the key themes of it. As I've kind of already discussed, again, free will and, destiny. Is Loki, sort of... and that's the question. When he's in the TVA, is Loki really truly free, or is his fate predetermined? And it explores that a lot. And then Loki even questions, like, hang on, if we're in the TVA, does that mean we now have free will and everyone else doesn't? Are we the only ones with free will? And you sort of figure that out as well, which is mentioned in episode 6, that they never had free will. It was always supposed to happen. The He Who Remains saw everything until a point, which at the end, there was a certain point that He Who Remains sees, and he's seen everything. He knows that they're going to talk to him. He knows what they're going to do. But then when it reaches that point, he's never seen it, and he doesn't know what's going to happen. And then that point happens, and then Sylvie kills him, which he had a feeling would come, but didn't see it coming because he didn't see past that point. And then he's like, well, that's it, man. I'll see you soon. But it's just very interesting. It's very interesting. And it's very interesting how, as I said, literally, this whole multiverse and Kang's introduction, it basically sets up Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness and Ant-Man Wasp Quantumania. And how it sets it up is with the whole point of, because in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, he explores all the universes, all the multiverses. There's different Doctor Strangers, there's, America Chavez that comes into play. And that all falls into line because of the Loki show. And again, Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, without getting too much into it, not a good movie. It's better than Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, but not like not as good compared to the first Doctor Strange, in my opinion. Anyway, and again, another important thing I find was that the character growth. We got to see, because the Loki show is based on Loki, we get to focus more on him. And he sort of grows as a character, and we get to see that. He sort of transforms from this villain, to sort of being more of a hero and realizing that, there's more to life than ruling. And he realizes that a lot more in season 2, which I will talk about when I do that episode. And then again, the whole thing of, as much as, the multiverse is created and amazing, was something that's questioned, and I questioned as well on the show, that hang on, even though we have the multiverse, was it the right thing for Silver to kill He Who Remains? Was that the right choice? And that's sort of a big question at the end of the day. So it's crazy. Anyway, now here's some behind the scenes fun facts for you about the Loki show. I've sort of gone into depth about it, talking about the episodes. Now let's get into the fun stuff, the little fun, juicy things. So Tom Hiddleston actually trained the cast before this started. What I mean by train them is, before filming began, Hiddleston sort of hosted a Loki lecture to help the cast understand his character's history in the MCU, which I guess is really good because the whole show is based on Loki. So if he sort of, was able to help the cast understand how Loki ticks and how he is, which then helps them be able to play their roles in this show. And clearly he did a good job, because everyone in this show is casted beautifully, knows what they're talking about, knows what they're doing. They're great. It's awesome. It's amazing. Another thing that is interesting in the show, and something that I didn't mention, but in the first episode, when Mobius was showing, Loki, his past and his future, and, showing all this stuff, where he dies at the hands of Thanos, as I mentioned earlier, yada, yada, yada. Something that they sort of put in there, which we never saw, is that Loki was actually there was a Loki DB Cooper scene, which is based on a real mystery, a real thing. So the show references the infamous 1971 plane hijack case, where a man known as DB Cooper vanishes after parachuting out of a plane. Now that's a real thing you can happen. You can look it up. So there's a guy that literally hijacks a plane, parachutes out and just vanishes out of thin air. And how the show explains it is that Loki was actually DB Cooper, and it was Loki that vanishes out of the plane, and that Loki just gets captured by, Thor and Asgard. And the reason why he's DB Cooper is because he lost a bet. So he's having fun. And then Witchy asked, why did the TVA let me do that if it's a fun thing? So that had the TVA seal of approval to do all that stuff. Anyway, it's just a crazy thing. But it's a little funny little thing, and it's cool. And it's based on a real thing. It's a real mystery. Like, DB Cooper literally hijacked a plane, as I said, and then, miraculously disappeared. And he was never found again. And it was like, what the f***? Like, how did that happen? How did he manage that? Maybe Loki is real, and maybe DB Cooper is a variant version of Loki. Who knows? Maybe he's a time traveler. Anyway, getting off track here. And then, as I said, the Infinity Stones were used as paperweights. I feel in my notes. Something that came up as well. So in episode 5, when they're in the Void, there's a little cool reference. You can see as they're panning down when they're going into the sort of underground base that they are in the Void with the Lokis, our Loki that we're following, with the RO variant Lokis, like the Kid Loki and all that, you see underground a jar with a tiny frog that's dressed as Thor. That's a reference to Frog, which is literally in the comics. There is actually a Thor frog called Frog. And that's a real thing. There's actually, they made a version of Thor who's a frog. And they referenced it in the show and showed it off, which is very cool. And it's the Thor issue 365 where Frog first appears. So you can look that up. And yeah, that's a cool little reference to the comics. Now, going to sort of off, all Thor and Loki and all that, going into sort of an Easter egg for Mobius. Now, something we see in the show is Mobius has an obsession with jet skis. Very much an obsession with jet skis. And it sort of makes you wonder, if, Mobius has this obsession with jet skis, maybe it's a nod to his lost memories. Maybe just sort of hinting that he might have had a life outside the TVA, which he did. Because, as the show says at the start of the show, that they were all created for the TVA to work for the TVA. No, they were stolen out the timeline. They are variants. The TVA workers are variants themselves and got taken from the timeline to work for the TVA and work for the sacred timeline. So it's a whole jam back of things, and because of that, his obsession of jet skis may have come from lost memories. And that's why it's sort of a little cool nod, saying that he doesn't know it because all he knows his life is just the TVA, but it's actually lost memories of, his life. And then another thing as well is that Kang's presence was actually teased very early on because there was some TVA murals and statues that were subtly foreshadowing He Who Remains and hinting at Kang's eventual arrival. So there was things in the background, if you really paid close attention, won't say where, Kang, and that's why I want you to watch it, you got to find it, that Kang was going to come up and eventually He Who Remains was going to be there. So it's just very interesting stuff. And that's pretty much it. That's all, I could talk all day about this and I've gone on for a while. To sort of wrap this up in a nice needle and thread, a nice little bow. That's a better way of saying it. Needle and thread. I don't know what I'm talking about. But a nice little bow is that out of all the shows, again, I'm just restating what I've said. Out of all the shows that Marvel's done, I full-heartedly recommend you watch this one. If you're a Marvel fan, you haven't seen this show, you're not a Marvel fan, in my opinion. Just saying. But if you are a Marvel fan, I'm kidding. But if you're a Marvel fan and you haven't given this show the day of light, or you just haven't been bothered to, be bothered to. Watch this show, watch season 1, and watch season 2. Because I will talk also about season 2. So you make sure to watch those, make sure to watch that, because I will talk about it. So you can actually at least have watched it and come back to me. So, again, if you've watched this episode now without watching the show, you have just spoiled everything for you. Well done. But no. In all honesty, oh my God. I'm still going to, even though I watched episode 1 and 2 just for this episode, I'm going to finish watching season 1. It's one of my rewatchable shows, and I could probably rewatch it maybe for a few more times, and then maybe I've watched it too many times that I could watch in my head without even actually watching it. But man, it's just an amazing show. So I think, yeah, I'm just all, happy about this show. Nothing bad about it, nothing negative compared to Ant-Man and Wasp: Quantumania last episode, which I did that movie for a reason, to show that I don't just talk about awesome things. I can talk about negative things too. And I want to do more of those episodes too. I'm going to talk about things that piss me off, because I want to show you guys that I'm just not a positive guy. There are movies, shows, or songs that piss me off, and I'll talk about them. But I do like talking about the positive things, because it cheers me up, keeps me going, and I mean, I love them. I could probably talk more about the positive things than the negative. I mean, it's easier. But I think I'm going to leave that there. So, thank you so much if you stayed this long, thank you so much for listening or watching this episode. And, I will stay tuned, because I will reveal the next one whenever that comes out, and I hope you all will. Peace out.